So yeah, 2009 was a pretty good year. Honestly, like I'm looking at the list right now and it was a really cool year for video games. It wasn't the best, but it was definitely riding the highs of the superhero boom that was about to happen. We had movies like The Dark Knight, Iron Man, The Incredible Hulk, Hellboy 2, Punisher Warzone, just a lot of movies that were superhero focused. And it was actually pretty cool to see that a year later we had superhero inspired games, with 2009 introducing the Arkham Asylum series, as well as Prototype and inFamous itself.
Activation plus 6 minutes. Pulse is 45. Respiration 10. Looking good, Cole.
So these games came out to help, I guess, revolutionize what superhero games were supposed to be, or what we wanted them to be, with an added narrative, with an action gameplay style and stuff like that. inFamous was special to me because it was a little weird at first, because at the time, a lot of you may not know, parkour was a very big thing. It was pretty popular, and in about like what 2006 to 2012, we had a lot of parkour stuff going on. On November 11th, 2008, we got Mirror's Edge, which was a game that was solely focused on action combat and parkour. So it goes to kind of show that this time in gaming, there was a lot of elements introduced to games where you had characters that could traverse buildings and stuff like that. It helped open world games add more verticality for video games and the maps that they were built in, without kind of always including vehicles for a lot of them. And I believe that inFamous took this and kind of ran with it, pun intended. Spider-Man 2, I believe, showed that there was a lot of room for superhero games and games to be done well. So we had obviously a lot of people asking for games like that, where you just were able to play that superhero. Then you have games, of course, that were trying to focus on what was popular during the time, parkour being one of them. And then as well, you just combine the whole superhero aspect in general. You have inFamous, which was a Sony exclusive that was really well received and something that we were looking forward to, because this was done by the people who made the Sly Cooper series, Sucker Punch. And we didn't really think that they were going to make a game that would be cool or serious. You know, back then, your studio was known for their mascot kind of IP. For example, when you look at Naughty Dog, you didn't really see Uncharted as a game that could be as good as it is today, in terms of having that narrative-driven experience, having the action, the gunplay. Hell, you're snapping people's necks. You know, it's weird when you have the people that created Crash Bandicoot, which was Sony's biggest mascot at one point, now making games that are this serious. Sony knew that, you know, their fan base from the PlayStation 2 era was growing up, and we were looking for games that were a little more serious. So that's why I think that if we look at PlayStation 3 games and Xbox 360 games, you're going to see a lot more mature, teen, angsty, hardcore kind of games. God of War, for example, being like the biggest kind of like, I don't know, like Unga Bunga kind of game, if you think about it. These were the topics that were focused on in 2009. inFamous was here to kind of show us a new superhero, a new story, something that's not attached to any kind of DC or Marvel property, which was really cool, and it's a breath of fresh air. And it was something that I don't know if everybody really thought was going to hit or miss with. And honestly, from what it looked like, it had a lot to kind of live up to, because it had Prototype coming out just about a month later, which was multi-platform, whereas inFamous was only on PlayStation 3. And then you had Batman coming out in August, which was just insane because, you know, these two games could quickly overshadow what inFamous was. And honestly, I feel like it did. What sucks is I'm probably going to have to beat this game twice, but what we're going to end up looking at is most of the game is done. What we need to do is an evil finish. Basically, just complete everything as the bad guy. And I think a lot of the story ones are going to follow. I think our hardest one is going to be Rockhound because we have to do all the shards. But the problem is I need to purchase every positive upgrade for each power, which is why I'm thinking I may have to do a second playthrough as a good guy just to get True Hero, which really sucks. So Rockhound can be found either during one or the other, I guess. I think I'm going to do a little bit more research onto what I have to do for those. Then I have to take down 25 enemies while riding on a moving train, which I believe I can probably get on a mission and kind of farm it that way. So we'll do that. Get off my cloud. I believe this is an easy one. It's pretty much just killing people by throwing them off the roof, which I should get during my evil playthrough. So Bio Leech is evil. All of that is pretty much evil. So we're good to go. So in 2023, I decided to revisit a lot of my PlayStation 3 games. And I think that inFamous, whether I platinumed it or not, was going to be one of the 1 or 2 games that I thought about first when it came to that era of games that I really enjoyed during the PS3's life cycle. inFamous takes a page from like normal storytelling when it comes to superhero stuff, where Cole McGrath ends up delivering a package that turns out to be a bomb. It explodes, and whether you think that your powers have awakened because of this explosion, or if it was some kind of radioactive spider version for him, that's kind of what the game expects you to believe at first, and from there you're going to decide whether you're going to be a good guy or you're going to be a bad guy. So inFamous kind of came out around the time that Prototype did, and honestly that was kind of the battle of the two similar games. You know, it's the tale as old as time, where we have like 2 games that are very similar, or 2 movies that are very similar, etc., that are just 2 competing products that are coming out, and one is usually going to overshadow the other. The thing is, I don't really think that Prototype did, luckily, because when we have exclusives for Sony, or exclusives, hell, even for Xbox, they tend to do better just on the name and brand loyalty alone. There's kind of that loud majority that kind of goes out enough to kind of combat, you know, the sales numbers that Prototype probably could have done better than inFamous, let's say. So it goes to show that inFamous was doing well when it came out. And my experience with inFamous is a good one. The thing is, now playing it in 2023, when I finally got the platinum for it, I don't really think it was that good. We had games like Fable 2 that came out the year prior. We had games like Knights of the Old Republic, Mass Effect, etc. So games where you had to have a morality system wasn't a fresh take. I will say that having the open city, having this new world, this new story, definitely was what drew everybody to the inFamous character, because he was a little more... he was something that you could kind of connect to a lot more than even Batman, let's say. So again, if you were to think about the fact that we had Batman Arkham Asylum come out the same year, you would see that inFamous was also just on par with that kind of level of story and kind of like detail and love for a character with a background. The problem being that, you know, Batman is Batman, and Batman's going to come out on top no matter what kind of new IP you have for a character. That's unfortunately what happened with inFamous. I would say it wasn't a bad thing at all. I think that this was still a good way to kind of like help inFamous get noticed, because you had people who were getting ready to play the Batman Arkham Asylum game. They were going to see how good it was, and they were going to try other superhero games because of it. I think that inFamous was great for its time because it took that step of, we're going to make a new character, we're going to make a new superhero, and we're going to have our own story. It was a beautiful take, and it's something that has now affected, let's say, the new Spider-Man games that are out for Sony. And let's be real, I like to think that inFamous was one of the games that helped Sony see that, superhero games are, if done well, a good way to kind of have exclusive and, studios work on them with their own stories, as opposed to kind of just like, banking on characters that are new that nobody knows about, which is their biggest fear. The biggest problem with Sony, Xbox, Microsoft, etc. Just people, they don't, like, the executives don't really want to gamble too much. If something seems like a money-making idea, it's going to be picked over. And, inFamous was one of the first few games to kind of like, during that PS3 era, one of the first few like Sony IPs that were exclusive that was able to kind of like show that, we do want superhero games, we do want our own stories, and adding that morality system was nice because it would give us a new take on how we build our character, the choices we want to make, and as well as affect the story of what to come. Sadly, that didn't age well with inFamous. So like I said, you had games like Mass Effect, you had games like Fable 2 with morality systems, you had games like Knights of the Old Republic that had this morality system. We all know what BioWare did to kind of really show how to make... We all know how BioWare really were forerunners when it came to making video games that allowed you to make choices that affected the game later on down the road. And they were masters of their craft. They really knew what to do, and they really showed that love by making those choices matter. And I think the problem in inFamous was that they didn't do it that well. They really kind of dropped the ball, because when I played the game last year, in comparison to when I played it in 2009, they feel like two different games. And the game was highly regarded back in 2009. It got away with the fact that, you're able to have this character have good and bad decisions, but they never really mattered. And you can even tell that when I'm playing this game, I had to play it twice just to get the platinum. And I didn't really remember playing the villain side too much. I know that I did beat the game as a superhero or a good guy the first time. And then when I went to play it again as the bad guy, I think I was a little soured because I did miss one of the trophies, and I realized I had to play the game 2 more times after my first playthrough. And I didn't really care to play for it at that point. I think I was just tired. I was burnt out by it. I didn't really care for it. I thought the story was really cool, but I didn't really get to see the villain side, and that was kind of the problem, because when I finally go back to playing the villain, I noticed that a lot of the choices that I make didn't really matter. They always remained with a similar outcome. The outcomes only being different in a couple of words being said, or if anything, just a red or blue tint being added to the cutscene. And it was really disappointing, because when I played this game the first time, I loved it. It was a great story. It was something that I rooted for after Sony released it, and I hoped that everybody was going to pick it up and enjoy it and love it. I hope that we were going to get sequel after sequel, and that's a story for another day, but it did well enough. It did well enough for us to really enjoy the game. So when I realized that I had to play the game again now recently, and the choices were just pretty much the same, I really just felt cheated. I kind of feel like this game is not as good as it used to be, or what it was supposed to be. There were bad things that were also wrong with the game that I'd like to talk about, but I think the biggest problem is the fact that it's supposed to be a story where your decisions are affecting your character and kind of like changing things through your actions. Everything was a consequence. No good deed goes unpunished. I feel like Sucker Punch kind of really copped out on a lot of the story elements. So after going back with rose-tinted glasses, I think my eyes really opened up to the problems in inFamous. And it's still a great game. It's still one of my favorite games. It's still one of the games that I'd love to see come back, either remade, continued, etc. I still want more inFamous, but I would be stupid to tell you guys that this game was perfect. I want to talk about how IGN, which is, I really hate having to go to IGN for, I guess, like reviews or anything like that, or what they reviewed them at. But, going back in time, I kind of want to see what the consensus was, at least even from big name kind of journalists or whatever, or, like companies. And they gave it a 9.2, which is actually not far from what I would have given it. I think I would have given it like a 9 or so back then as well. I think that even being a Sony fanboy back then, I still wouldn't have called this game perfect, but I still thought it was excellent. I think it was going in the right direction of having a great narrative and having a character we were going to love. And they still got that right, I think. They still introduced a character that is long lasting. But I think nowadays the game has not aged well. I would probably give this game a 7.5. Mostly because playing the game itself was just really rough. I know that the game was a little goofy in terms of how the characters moved. I also feel like it's a little silly that you have this guy who can shoot, lightning from his fingertips, and it still feels like a third-person shooter. And his primary weapons are him shooting lightning, throwing grenades, things like that, shooting missiles, etc. I think that that's pretty silly for what it is, and I'm still willing to, say I still love the game. It's never going to be like something that I just bash on now. It's just more like it goes to show what the mindset was back then. We were so heavily involved with everything being a shooter, not even some things being a shooter. I believe that inFamous was kind of not forced to be that way. I just kind of feel like, it was the easy way out. It was easy for a studio developer to be like, hey, why don't we just make it a shooter? That way we could kind of like not make it as imaginative with his powers and things like that. Which, again, it wasn't the problem. It's still not a problem. Still love the game. But then you couple that with, the jankiness of the game and how everything was like a climbing simulator. You had games like Assassin's Creed. You had Uncharted, for example. Everything was just climbing, parkour. And that's what this game had, and it was clunky. Honestly, replaying this game, I would go up walls that I thought I can go up and I couldn't grab onto, even though I would move over to the next part and grab that ledge instead, even though I should be able to grab both of them. I still love the game. I went back and I enjoyed the story. It was very cartoony in comparison to how I remembered it. The second game is a lot more serious. The third even more serious because of how more realistic the characters look. But I still enjoyed the game. I had to beat it just for the villain side and the villain story. And I had to do a lot of the tedious trophies. I had to look for the shards that were extremely annoying. We'll get more to that. We'll get back to that in a second. But I think a lot of the things that I disliked about it, which is why I never completed it for the platinum, was because of the stunts that were included in the game that were kind of locked, and they were more of an obstacle course than they were like kind of like a list, because in order to, I believe, get to one or the others, you had to complete the one that was listed. I'm not really sure about that. You guys can probably correct me if that was the case, but I found myself struggling with the fact that like I would get to a certain stunt that I was unable to do easily, and it was just a pain in the ass. Something like, shoot somebody in the head while you're falling. Very annoying to do, but it's something you had to do in order to get to the next kind of stunt. I believe that when I finished the game the first time, when I played it back in 2009, I did not want to go back into that game. And what ended up happening was that I think I was like one or two off in the stunt list, and I just like gave up. I lost my save, and I had to pay for it now, like over 10 years later. So I go back, I do the stunts, and it was not fun. The stunt list was a pretty cool idea, but it was just annoying enough. Now, the reason why I had to play this game twice over, and the reason why I never got the platinum back in the day, was because if you pre-ordered the game through GameStop, you were actually given the Gigawatt blades or so. I don't remember the name exactly, but you were given the blades, and they were a power that actually extended to good or bad playthroughs, meaning that, if you were good or bad, you could buy them. Certain powers were either too evil, so they gave you different versions of them or something like that. So that was a part of the trophy list where you had to get all of the villain powers. You had to get all of the good powers. And as I said, I beat the game the first time as a hero, as a good guy. And so I ended up buying the blades through my first playthrough, not realizing that they didn't give you enough experience to earn all of the powers in the game in the first place. So when you beat the game, you struggle to get thousands of points of experience, and each enemy only gives you like 5. So it was really annoying to have to go back it wasn't even go back. I only had like a couple powers that I had to get to unlock in order to get that trophy. So I could have sat there and grinded it out, or I could have just replayed the story as a good guy, and it was just too infuriating for me. I didn't want to do it. I played a little bit as a villain, and I was just like, forget it. I want to move on. With 2009, there were so many games coming out. I also had Prototype pre-ordered, so I ended up picking up that game anyway. And it was easy for me to kind of forget about inFamous, as well as Batman coming out about 2 months after that. But I think the biggest gripe with inFamous 1 in trophy collecting, if you want to really go back into that time capsule or anything like that, if you want to go back to the time capsule of online forums where we were talking about the trophies back in 2009, there was no worse trophy than Rockhound, only because there was no way to really kind of like check off the list of where every shard was. It was just really hard to just focus on such a small, as you're walking through the streets, again, this is Parkour City. So we were kind of just like running around looking for little blips of shards on the map. What I recently found out during this playthrough, and it's something that people never talked about, was the fact that Cole McGrath, as a character, is the centerpiece of the map, right? When you're walking on your mini-map. When he hits his ping, it's either a bubble or it's some kind of cylinder, but it has obviously a radius that if your map is not in that radius, right? If there's a piece that is not in that radius or whatever, if it's not anywhere near him, you're going to not see it. Duh. Obviously, you're not on the map. You're not on the mini-map. Why would it light up for you if you press the button to look for the shard? What nobody ever told me was that there's also a height restriction. If you're either too high up or too far down from the shard, it's not going to come up. So I missed about like 3 shards, and I finally realized that there was one building that I didn't scale, which was very near the intro of the game, the tallest building in the city when you kind of first start and wake up in the tutorial kind of area or whatever. If you climb all the way up, you're actually out of the range if you were to look for the shard that if you were standing on the bottom of that building. So when I finally climbed up and I find the shard there with the sun setting in the distance, I was just so relieved. I was so happy to finally get this platinum, mostly because it is still one of my most favorite games, honestly. Like, it's such a good take on a superhero genre that we still need, I think, in this day and age. I'm tired of playing games like I love Spider-Man, don't get me wrong. Insomniac Spider-Man is a masterpiece, and I can't wait for Wolverine, but I really miss creativity. I miss, like, new ideas and new characters, new games, and things like that that are just not freaking battle royales nowadays. So, I mean, I would say that my experience coming back to this game was... it was refreshing, but it was disappointing. Being older myself, it's easier to fall victim back then to just loving a game on a trailer alone, just an idea alone or something like that. And I think inFamous still did it well, but it definitely did not age well. And I will say that it was still something that was more of a learning stepping stone for Sucker Punch. I just wish that they would kind of lean more into the story aspect of it. I will say, though, that inFamous was a great experience, and it was really nice to relive this experience again. I really want to do more platinums, but I really just mostly want to talk about the games that I play themselves. It's not something that I really want to do in terms of just only doing platinum, so I appreciate you guys that just watch the videos, that enjoy listening to me talk about them, because that's something that I'd rather focus on than the trophies themselves. Thank you guys. I know this was way too long. I've been delayed on this. I've been wanting to do like other videos, and I think that's another reason why I'm kind of trying to see if I could just do other videos that don't involve platinums, because that too takes too much time. And as much as I enjoy the platinums, I don't think I'm cut out to be a platinum chaser for every game that comes out. It's more like I want to platinum the games that I enjoy, talk about them, but also talk about the ones that I can't platinum or I don't want to platinum. So I will see you guys on the next one.